Hey there and welcome. My name is Def. Today I'm kind of going to be going over a little bit of the ongoing situation between Bobby Lee and Brendan Schuab and that controversy. It's kind of blown up over the past couple days, weeks, and has ties to many different podcasters, comedians who are kind of dominating the entertainment industry right now. This is not the first instance in which Bobby Lee and Brendan Schuab have had issues. In 2017, episode 88 of the TigerBelly podcast was released, which featured Bryan Callen as the main guest. Bobby started expressing concerns over whether Brendan Schuab was around Kalila, or, hanging around her. Bobby Lee explained that he had bumped into Brendan, whose greeting and first response was, "Your girlfriend is hot," kind of off-putting. Kalila then went on to explain that Bobby Lee had seen a set of messages exchanged between the two on Twitter after the couple attended an episode of Brendan Schuab's The Fight Companion podcast. This in and of itself is nothing to raise eyebrows over. However, this is only where this rope begins to unwind. On episode 500 of The Fighter and the Kid, Bobby Lee confronts Brendan Schuab about his feelings, saying, quote, "I feel tension between us," referring to Brendan Schuab and Bryan Callen, then pointing at Brendan and saying, "You give my girlfriend fuck eyes," to which Brendan Schuab responded, "Everyone gives your girlfriend fuck eyes." Back to the present, or relatively so, episode number 49 of Trash Tuesday, a podcast featuring Kalila Kuhn, Annie Lederman, and Esther Pavitsky, aired, shedding light on new allegations against Brendan Schuab. This ended up being a groundbreaking episode as Annie Lederman went on to formally accuse a comedian with the initials BS of harassing her, asking her to follow him to his truck and give him, air quotations, a blowjob. The trio then goes on to explain how they were threatened with a lawsuit from said comedian. After this video came out, several months later on, episode 496 of the Fighter and the Kid podcast, Brendan Schuab goes on to talk about the situation, giving his account and ultimately trying to calm the long-lasting effects it's had on his career to a minimum. Brendan goes on to recount the alleged situation discussed on the Trash Tuesday podcast, confirming that he did in fact have a truck at the time, a Ford Raptor, that he said he only had for a couple weeks, but said that he thinks that this was in large part due to misunderstanding. Brendan also confirmed that he has no plans on suing anybody. In rapid succession, episode 251 of the H3 podcast aired, an episode featuring Bobby and Kalila, in which they, after some prodding from Ethan Klein and some visible discomfort from Bobby, discussed the situation delicately. Bobby and Kalila asked about the allegations and response on the Trash Tuesday podcast, and began with details about their continued heartache and headache revolving around Brendan Schuab, recounting a time when Brendan was actively flirting and trying to get with Kalila, all while Bobby was already with Kalila for several years. Kalila ultimately explains that she felt the deal's off after an agreement she and Brendan had to keep the details of the situation quiet had been broken. This in reference to Brendan's discussion of the situation on episode number 496 of The Fighter and the Kid. Kalila then explains that any time Brendan wanted to get a hold of her or had an issue, he would go directly through Bobby. Bobby then went on to explain that he had been screamed at, bullied, and harassed by what Kalila called "get your bitch in line" calls, and that he feared even talking about it, exclaiming several times while looking at Kalila concerned, "We're fucked." We learned from Kalila that the threats of lawsuit was a text alluding to legal action of some sort, and that she had ultimately talked it through and chalked it up to a misunderstanding. In a shocking twist, Bobby then explains that it wasn't just him. Quote directly from him, "It was a phone call with other podcasters."
But we talked it through, but the truth is the truth.
It was not just him.
There was a whole barrage.
It was
Don't say the name.
I'm not gonna. But it was a phone call with other podcasters. Threatened my career. They called me a coward. You've always been a.
Sorry, that's not acceptable. Blackmail.
They said they would expose me.
And they threatened my career, called me a coward, called me a and they said they would expose me. They went on to mention some theory that Bobby was a ringleader of some Reddit group made to trash Brendan Schuab online. Bobby finished the podcast after pouring himself out, revealing one of the secrets that Brendan threatened to expose about Kalila, being that Bobby and Kalila at one point agreed upon having an open relationship, a time during which Kalila had, with Bobby's consent, that's the key word, with Bobby's consent, a sexual relationship. After having bombs like these dropped on you, and the newfound pressure of answering these kinds of allegations, we then saw the likes of Bryan Callen come forward with some details of his own on The Fighter and the Kid episode 796. Bryan went on to say, Bobby is 100% right in his anger at me, in how he felt, and I am 100% wrong. And I'm the guy, I take full responsibility. Apparently taking responsibility for what Bobby called a full-on barrage. Bryan then went on to explain that this was an entirely separate issue from the Brendan Schuab-Kalila Kuhn controversy, being separated by what Brendan Schuab described as 3 to 5 weeks, approximately. This means, when Bobby said it was just him, it was a phone call with other podcasters and they threatened my career, called me a coward, called me a P-word, and they said they would expose me, he was in part referring to Bryan Callen. Bryan, with Brendan, then went on to claim that Bobby and Kalila were threatening Brendan himself.
When I saw with my own eyes that some of that long-term harassment was coming from the TigerBelly hub, okay? And that's what I saw with my own eyes. So what I did was I went into protection mode, I saw red, and I assumed the worst about Bobby and about Kalila. After speaking to Bobby, I realized, I really believe that he has nothing to do with it. I don't think he even knows anything about it. I believe him, and I said that on the phone.
Brendan continued, hinting at threats to his family's physical safety and his business, and then alluding to the apparent Reddit attack page. Bryan said he saw with his own eyes proof that the TigerBelly podcast was responsible for the Reddit page, ultimately claiming that Bobby and Kalila were conspiring against Brendan and his business. This was a point of discussion on the H3 podcast, in which Kalila set the record straight, saying that Bobby Lee was incapable of orchestrating such a Reddit attack as he answers his phone with the iPad. He's not very tech savvy. Bryan then apologized for his behavior, saying that Bobby had accepted his apology, but showed no interest in seeing Bryan any further.
He must have been so pissed off because, once again, let me say this. The way I spoke to Bobby is unacceptable. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, I've been bullied by guys like you my whole life, and it stops now. I'm not a bully, but if he said that, he was fucking right. It doesn't matter how angry I was. It doesn't matter that I was protecting him. Not an excuse.
That's not right.
Not a fucking excuse.
But to be fair to yourself, I appreciate you on it.
As for Brendan, we're in the midst of what the courts like to call discovery, as Brendan and Kalila share more details, and we learn more about the alleged events taking place over what seems to be the last decade, and the somewhat realistic possibility of a court case in the future. You'll be able to form your own opinion. That being said, will we ever learn more about the head request in Brendan Schwab's disposable Ford Raptor, his flirt incident with Kalila, happening some years prior when Bobby was very much in the picture, the FIs Bobby said Brendan Schuab shot at Kalila, and any other dirty secrets under the table? We'll have to wait and see.
Hey there, YouTube. So I thought I'd get some of my thoughts and opinions about the matter out, kind of talk a little bit about what I think, give some speculation, whether I think one or the other is correct, as there's still a lot of information coming out. That being said, I think it's, in general, it's never a good idea to draw conclusions this early in the situation, as I said, and we'll have to kind of wait and see. That being said, I do have some questions. Some questions I did end up having were, why didn't Bryan Callen come out with the facts before being called out by the H3 Podcast Live, even if he was not directly named as one of the people who were involved with this situation? I feel like it's kind of hit or miss. It's good that we got this information at all, otherwise we'd still be grasping at straws as to who these multiple different podcasters that Bobby directly mentioned were. Second question was, why was he so intent that he was the sole attacker / instigator in this bullying of Bobby, when Bobby himself mentioned that there were multiple perpetrators or podcasters? That just doesn't make sense to me. He was pretty clear about there being multiple podcasters, but Bryan was the only one to do it. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily sit well with me. Question 3 was, who, if any, other podcasters were involved with this? It's easy to speculate, but it's hard to come out and say I did it. And of course, was Theo Von involved? A question I've been itching my head about since hearing the word multiple in Bobby's statement. I've been itching my head about it. With the amount of animosity that Theo Von had previously with the TigerBelly crew, Bobby and Kalila combined, it would be no shock to me that he was involved with this in some way. Not to mention the fact that Theo Von is a pretty frequent guest of Bryan Callen's The Fighter and the Kid podcast show, in which they've on multiple occasions talked about Bobby and Kalila. This is of course speculation. Nothing yet has been provided to suggest that Theo Von or any other podcasters had anything to do with this bullying. But with Bobby Lee clearly hinting at multiple podcasters, we're left to kind of wonder. Personally, I think it was refreshing to see Bryan Callen come out and take some responsibility. It's something that frankly doesn't happen often enough. I honestly think others could learn a lesson from Bryan and step forward into the light, so to speak. I think overall, Bobby Lee has every right to be upset with this entire scenario. He kind of got dragged into it, and he was rightfully shaken, and by even mentioning Brendan's name and the alleged group of podcasters. He was bullied and threatened with extortion. I may be a tad exaggerated, but I mean blackmail at the very least. Which could be argued played a role in his recent relapse, which could potentially have some legal ramifications for Brendan and potentially Bryan. Bobby didn't deserve to be dragged into this. Even if by some strange coincidence, Bobby has lied to his long-term girlfriend and the rest of the world about his tech savviness, and was single-handedly managing a Reddit page dedicated to deplatforming Brendan Schuab. What transpired was unparalleled and inappropriate as a response. I've been a huge Bobby Lee fan for quite some time. I've seen the ups, I've seen the downs, and ultimately, the Slept King is not one to be slept on. Knowing now that he's been dealing with this dragon under the surface for what seems like years now, decades even, and still performing stand-up, doing 2 podcasts of his own, and being guests on all kinds of others, countless others, and still holding it all together, is nothing short of incredible. I personally am in awe of Bobby Lee for this, and all the strength that it takes to endure, like he has. And I really hope things are settled for good, because I'm really looking forward to the bottoms of Turtle Island. I'm blown away by the resilience and bravery portrayed by Kalila as well in this situation. She single-handedly won the chess match, placing the indestructible self-sacrifice card to solidify checkmate. Single-handedly. Honestly, the brass balls required to pull that off are unspeakably large. She heard that there was some dirt that was going to be thrown at her into the public eye, thinking it would hurt her and the way the public felt about her. So what did she do? She just did it herself. Nothing says fuck you to the knife-wielding would-be assassin than sticking a pocket knife in your own leg while staring menacingly at them. So badass, and I'm just so humbled before her absolute dedication to the truth as well. She saw a chance to be the first to speak and clear the air about a situation, rather than sit back and watch the tabloids start and let it fester in the public eye and become something it shouldn't have been. And that's brave. Bigger balls than I. All that being said, what are your thoughts and opinions on the matter? Drop a like, comment, and potentially subscribe. I think my count is at 2 subscribers right now. This may be the first of many videos. This may be the only one on this topic. It's kind of like a game of roulette, you never know. Links are in the description for all episodes mentioned. Special thanks to Silk Visuals for the quick update video regarding the Callen Confessions. Shout out to Grizzleboy Smith, my buddy, and Bobby Lee, Andrew Santino, and George, because that guy gets so little screen love. I do have a link to my art Instagram attached as well, where I upload some weekly original pieces. Feel free to check it out if you'd like. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Def, signing out.